My name is Aurora Morgan. I am 22 years old, and I live in Colorado. I didn't fall. I was pushed. 1 second, I was reaching for the mashed potatoes. The next, my stepfather's heavy hand slammed into my shoulder. The force was violent. It knocked the breath out of me. I tumbled backward, chair and all, hitting the hardwood floor with a loud crash. My hip throbbed instantly. Cranberry sauce splattered across my white blouse like blood. I looked up, stunned. Frank stood over me, his face red and twisting with rage. "This seat is for my real daughter," he spat, pointing a thick finger at the door. "Get out." Brittany, his biological daughter, stood behind him, smirking. She held a glass of wine and looked down at me like I was trash. But the push wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the silence. 23 people sat at that long table. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins, and my own mother. Not a single chair scraped back. Not one person moved to help me. My mother just stared at her plate, refusing to meet my eyes. In that silence, something inside me snapped. It wasn't my heart. It was the chain that had held me down for years. I stood up. I didn't cry. I looked at the kitchen island. Frank's phone was sitting there. It was unlocked. I wiped the sauce from my shirt. The game was over. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? My name is Aurora Morgan. I am 22 years old. My father was a giant of a man. I don't mean he was tall, though he was. I mean he took up space in a room. When he laughed, the windows rattled. When he hugged me, I felt safe. He built his company, Morgan Logistics, from a single truck to a fleet that crossed state lines. He taught me how to read a balance sheet before I knew how to ride a bike. He used to sit me on his knee and say, "Aurora, this is all for you. You're my legacy." Then he died. It happened fast. A heart attack at 45. One day, he was teaching me how to drive the forklift in the warehouse yard, and the next day the house was full of strangers wearing black and eating casseroles. I was 12 years old. My world turned gray. My mother, Linda, fell apart. She was a gentle woman, the kind who needed someone to lean on. Without my father, she was like a vine without a trellis. She wilted. For 2 years, it was just us. We were quiet, we were sad. But we were together. Then came Frank. He met my mother at a grief support group. Looking back, that feels like a joke. Frank didn't know how to grieve. He only knew how to take. He was a salesman, slick and shiny. He wore suits that were a little too tight and cologne that smelled like desperate money. He smiled too much. He told my mother she was beautiful 100 times a day. He brought her flowers. He fixed the leaky faucet. He filled the empty space in the house with his loud voice and his constant demands for attention. My mother bloomed again. I was happy for her, at first. I wanted her to smile. I didn't know the cost of that smile would be me. They got married 6 months after they met. Frank moved in, and he brought Brittany. Brittany was Frank's daughter from a previous marriage. She was my age, 14. She had bleached blonde hair and a phone that was glued to her hand. The first time she walked into our house, she looked around the living room like she was inspecting a hotel room she wasn't sure she liked. "It's okay," she said, popping her gum. "I guess." Frank clapped his hands. "It's a palace, princess. And it's all ours." He didn't say it's ours, including Aurora. He just said ours. The changes happened slowly, like a leak you don't notice until the floor is rotten. First, it was the bedrooms. I had the master suite on the second floor, the one with the bay window looking out over the garden. My father had painted it yellow for me. Frank said, "Brittany needs her privacy. She's sensitive to noise. She needs the garden view." My mother looked at me. "It's just a room, Aurora, be a good sister." I moved to the guest room down the hall. It was smaller, it faced the street. I didn't complain. I wanted to be good. Then it was the rules. If Brittany left a wet towel on the floor, Frank laughed. "She's creative. Creative people are messy." If I left a book on the coffee table, Frank sighed. He would sit me down for a lecture. "Aurora, you have to learn respect. You live in this house, you follow the rules. Why are you so ungrateful?" Ungrateful. That became his favorite word for me. "I bought groceries today, Aurora. You haven't said thank you. You're ungrateful. I let you live here rent-free, Aurora. You're ungrateful." He wasn't letting me live there. It was my father's house. But I couldn't say that. If I did, my mother would cry. She would say, "Please, Aurora. Don't cause trouble. Frank is trying so hard." She became his shadow. If Frank wanted steak, we ate steak, even though she was a vegetarian. If Frank wanted to watch football, the TV was on football. If Frank said I was being difficult, she agreed. She stopped seeing me. She only saw the problem Frank told her I was. Brittany, meanwhile, was worshipped. She was the golden child. Frank bought her a new car when she turned 16. A red convertible. I was driving my dad's old truck, paying for my own gas. Brittany needs a reliable car, Frank said. She's fragile. Brittany wasn't fragile. She was mean. She learned quickly that she could get away with anything. She stole my clothes. She read my diary and laughed about it at the dinner table. When I got upset, Frank would shake his head. Can't you take a joke, Aurora? You're so dramatic. No wonder you have no friends. I did have friends. But I stopped bringing them over. I didn't want them to see how small I was in my own home. I learned to be quiet. I learned to stay in my room. I learned that my mother had chosen her husband over her daughter. I started counting down the days until I turned 18. I thought things would change then. My father had told me about the trust fund. He had told me about the college money. He had said, "You'll never have to worry, Aurora." I held onto that promise like a life raft. I just had to survive Frank and Brittany for a few more years. Then I could leave. I could go to college. I could be free. I was wrong. The morning of my 18th birthday was a Tuesday. There was no cake. There were no balloons. My mother had left a card on the counter before she went to her yoga class. It had a $20 bill inside. "Happy birthday, sweetie. Love, Mom." Frank was in the kitchen, drinking coffee and reading the paper on his tablet. Brittany was still asleep. She usually slept until noon. "Happy birthday," Frank said without looking up. "Big day, you're an adult now." "Yes," I said. I poured myself a glass of water. "I have an appointment at the bank today to access the trust." Frank put the tablet down. He took off his reading glasses. He looked at me with a strange expression. It wasn't anger. It was something like pity mixed with satisfaction. "About that," he said. "We need to talk." My stomach dropped. "Talk about what?" "The economy," he said. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit down, Aurora." I sat. The wood felt cold against my legs. "Your father," Frank began, his voice smooth and fake sad, "was a good man, but he wasn't a wizard. The market changes. Investments go up, investments go down." "My father was conservative with money," I said. My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking under the table. "He put my college fund in secure bonds, he told me." Frank sighed. He rubbed his eyes. "He tried. But things happened before he died. Debts, bad market turns. The recession." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying there is no trust fund, Aurora." The room went silent. The refrigerator hummed. A bird chirped outside. "That's a lie," I whispered. "Watch your tone," Frank snapped. The mask slipped for a second. "I've been managing the estate for 6 years. I've tried to save what I could, but your mother and I, we have expenses, the house, the business." "The business makes millions," I said. "Morgan Logistics is huge." "It was huge," Frank corrected. "It was struggling when I took over. I saved it. It's F&M Global now, Frank and Morgan, and it takes capital to run a company. We had to liquidate some assets to keep the lights on." "You liquidated my college fund." "It was family money," he said, shrugging. "We are a family. We survive together." I stood up. "I'm going to the bank." "You can go," Frank said, picking up his tablet again. "But the account is empty. I closed it last week to pay the property taxes." I drove to the bank anyway. I cried the whole way. The banker, a kind woman named Mrs. Higgins who had known my father, looked at her computer screen and frowned. "I'm sorry, Aurora," she said softly. "Mr. Frank Miller is the executor of the estate until you turn 21. The stipulation for 18 was only for educational withdrawal, but he moved the funds into the general operating account for the business. It's legal. He has power of attorney." "Is there anything left?" I asked. She turned the screen so I could see. $0. I walked out of the bank. The sun was shining, but I felt like I was freezing to death. My father's promise was gone. My freedom was gone. I went home. I wanted to scream at my mother. I wanted to shake her and ask how she let this happen. But when I got there, I saw Brittany's car in the driveway. The trunk was open. Frank was loading suitcases into it. Brittany was standing there, holding a new designer bag, squealing. "I can't believe it," she yelled. "Paris." I walked up the driveway. "What's going on?" My mother came out of the house, smiling. "Oh, Aurora, isn't it wonderful? Brittany got accepted into that fashion program in Paris. The one she wanted." I looked at Brittany. She barely passed high school. She spent her days watching makeup tutorials. "That school costs $60,000 a year," I said. The number was burnt into my brain because I had looked at it once, dreaming, before realizing I could never afford it. "Frank says we have to invest in talent," Mom said, beaming. He paid the tuition this morning. It's a graduation gift. The world tilted. He had just told me there was no money. He had told me the market ate my inheritance. He had told me the business was struggling. But he had $60,000 for Brittany to go to Paris to pretend to study fashion. I looked at Frank. He was lifting a heavy bag into the trunk. He caught my eye. He winked. It wasn't a friendly wink. It was a victory lap. He knew I knew, and he knew I couldn't do anything about it. "Congratulations, Brittany," I said. My voice sounded dead. "Thanks," she said, not looking at me. "God, this bag is heavy." "Aurora, carry my carry-on to the car, would you?" I didn't move. "Aurora," Frank warned, "help your sister." I looked at my mother. She was checking her phone, oblivious. I walked past them. I went into the house. I went to my room and packed a bag. Not for Paris, for reality. I didn't go to college that fall. I couldn't afford it. I got a job waiting tables at a diner on the highway. I moved into a small apartment with 2 roommates. I took night classes at the community college, paying for them 1 shift at a time. But I didn't leave the family completely. I needed to know. I needed to see. Frank offered me a job at the company a few months later. "Entry level," he said. "Filing, reception, minimum wage. You need to learn the value of $1, Aurora, unlike Brittany, who is an artist." I took the job. He thought I was desperate. He thought I was defeated. He was wrong. I wasn't there to work. I was there to watch. Working at F&M Global, my father's company, was like watching a car crash in slow motion. Frank had changed everything. He fired the old managers, the men and women who had built the business with my dad. He hired his friends. They were loud men who spent more time playing golf than managing logistics. I sat at the front desk. I answered phones. I made coffee. I was the invisible girl. The stepdaughter, they called me, not the owner's daughter, just the stepdaughter. Frank didn't think I was a threat. To him, I was just a receptionist. He left files on my desk to file. He left his email open when he went to lunch. He had loud speakerphone conversations with his door open. I listened, and I started to see the pattern. It was all about Brittany. Paris didn't last. Brittany got kicked out after 3 months for not attending classes. She came home with 6 trunks of clothes and a French poodle. "The professors were jealous of me," she told Mom over dinner. "They didn't understand my vision." "Of course, sweetie," Mom said, cutting Brittany's steak for her. "They were stifling you." Frank nodded. "You need your own brand, no bosses." So Frank launched Brittany B. Designs. I saw the invoices at work. Frank withdrew $200,000 from the company's operating capital. He labeled it marketing consulting. He rented a studio in the city. He hired a seamstress because Brittany didn't know how to sew. He paid for a launch party that cost more than my entire year's salary. I was there, serving drinks, because Frank said it would save money on catering staff. I watched Brittany twirl in a dress she didn't make, drinking champagne she didn't pay for, surrounded by people who were laughing at her behind her back. The clothing line failed in 6 months. The clothes were unwearable. The reviews were terrible. Brittany cried for a week. Then came the life coaching phase. "I have so much wisdom to share," Brittany said. Frank drained another $100,000. He paid for a website, a photo shoot, and a luxury office space that Brittany visited twice. Then it was the event planning phase. Then the influencer phase. Every time Brittany had a whim, the company bled. I started making copies. Every invoice, every bank transfer, every time Frank listed a personal expense as a business deduction, I kept a second set of files. I hid them in a box under my bed in my small apartment. I saw the company's profits diving. My father's legacy was being eaten alive by Brittany's hobbies. One afternoon, I went to visit my grandmother. She was my father's mother. She lived in a nursing home now. She was the only person left who remembered who I really was. She was frail, sitting in her wheelchair by the window. Her hands shook, but her eyes were sharp. "Aurora," she croaked. "Come here." I sat beside her. "Hi, Grandma." She reached into the pocket of her cardigan. She pulled out a small, silver USB drive. It looked old. The paint was chipping off. "Take this," she whispered. "What is it?" "Your father's," she said. She looked at the door to make sure the nurse wasn't listening. "He gave it to me a week before he died. He was worried. He didn't trust Frank. He told me, if anything happens to me, keep this safe. Give it to Aurora when she's smart enough to understand it." She pressed it into my palm. Her skin was like dry paper. He knew Aurora. He knew Frank was a snake, but he couldn't prove it yet. He was gathering things. It's all in there. I closed my fingers around the drive. It felt warm. Why wait until now? I asked. Because you were a child, she said. You were soft. You needed to get tough. I watched you, Aurora. I watched you take the hits. I watched you work for that man. You're not soft anymore. You're angry. Good. She squeezed my hand. Anger is fuel, she said. Burn him down. I went home that night. I plugged the drive into my laptop. It was password protected. I tried my birthday, nothing. I tried my dad's birthday, nothing. Then I typed in the name of the old boat we used to fish on, the one he sold to start the company. Ladybird. The folder opened. I stared at the screen. It wasn't just files, it was a map of Frank's past. And then I knew. It wasn't just incompetence. It wasn't just favoritism, it was theft. Christmas is supposed to be about peace. In our house, it was about performance. Frank insisted on a massive dinner every year. He invited everyone. My mother's sisters, his business partners, distant cousins. He wanted a full house so he could stand at the head of the table and give a toast about how successful he was. I almost didn't go. I had the USB drive. I had the invoices. I was building my case, but I needed one last thing. I needed to see if there was any humanity left in my mother. I needed to give her one last chance to be my mother, not Frank's wife. I arrived a little late. The house was packed. It smelled of pine and expensive roast beef. There was laughter, loud and fake. I walked into the dining room. The table was set for 24 people. Crystal glasses, silver cutlery, red napkins folded like swans. I looked for my seat. Since I was a little girl, even before Frank, I had always sat to the right of the host chair. It was my spot. My dad used to sit at the head, and I sat next to him. After he died, when Frank took the head of the table, I kept my seat. It was the one tradition I had left. I walked over. Brittany was sitting there. She was wearing a red sequined dress that was too tight. She was typing on her phone, ignoring the guests. I stood behind the chair. Brittany, you're in my seat. She didn't look up. Frank told me to sit here. This has been my seat for 20 years, I said. I tried to keep my voice calm, but the noise of the party dropped. People started to watch. Frank walked in from the kitchen, holding a carving knife and a fork. He was sweating slightly. He looked at me, then at Brittany. What's the problem? He boomed. Aurora is trying to make me move, Brittany whined. She put on her baby voice. Daddy, tell her. Frank turned to me. His eyes were cold. Aurora, don't cause a scene. Find another chair. There are no other chairs, I said. I looked around. The table was full. You invited 24 people. There are 24 seats. This is mine. It's just a chair, my mother said from across the table. Her voice was thin, pleading. Aurora, please just grab a stool from the kitchen. A stool. They wanted me to sit on a wooden stool at the corner of the table while Brittany sat in the place of honor. No, I said. I'm not sitting on a stool. I am the daughter of the man who built this house. I am sitting in my seat. I reached for the back of the chair. Brittany, move, Brittany shrieked. She touched me. She hadn't. I hadn't touched her. But that didn't matter. Frank crossed the distance in 2 steps. He didn't speak. He didn't ask me to stop. He shoved me. He used his free hand, the one not holding the knife, but he put his weight behind it. He slammed his open palm into my shoulder. I flew backward. My heels slipped on the polished floor. I crashed into the side table. A vase of flowers shattered. I hit the ground hard, my hip bone connecting with the wood. The room went dead silent. I lay there for a second, the wind knocked out of me. My shoulder burned. I tasted copper in my mouth. I looked up. Frank was standing over me, chest heaving. This seat is for my real daughter, he shouted. His voice echoed off the high ceilings. Get out. I am sick of your jealousy. Get out of my house. I looked at Brittany. She was smirking. She took a sip of her wine, looking down at me like I was a bug she had just stepped on. Then I looked at my mother. She was sitting 3 feet away. She saw her husband push her daughter. She saw me on the floor. She didn't move. She didn't scream at him. She didn't rush to help me. She picked up her wine glass and took a long, shaky sip. She looked at the tablecloth. That was the moment. The hope I had held onto, the hope that my mother was just brainwashed, that she still loved me deep down, died. It withered and turned to dust right there on the floor. She had chosen, and so had I. I pushed myself up. My leg shook. My blouse was stained with cranberry sauce from a bowl I had knocked over. I must have looked insane. Okay, I said. My voice was quiet, but in the silence it sounded like a gunshot. Okay. I stood up. I brushed the glass off my skirt. I looked at Frank. He was still holding the carving knife, looking defiant, waiting for me to cry or scream. I didn't cry. I looked past him. On the kitchen island, behind him, his phone was sitting on the charger. The screen was lit up. He had left it unlocked because he was using it to play Christmas music over the speakers. I knew what was on that phone. I knew he used a text app to talk to his associates because he thought it was encrypted. I walked toward the door. I had to pass the island. Frank sneered. "That's right, run away. Go back to your little apartment." I paused at the island. I reached out and grabbed his phone. I slipped it into my pocket in one fluid motion. He didn't see. He was too busy posturing for his guests. I walked to the front door. I opened it. The cold winter air hit my face. It felt clean. I turned back one last time. "Merry Christmas," I said. I walked out. I got into my rusted truck. I locked the doors. I pulled Frank's phone out of my pocket. I scrolled to the messages. Jackpot, I drove away. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the executioner, and I had the axe. I drove until the house was just a speck in my rearview mirror, but the feeling of Frank's hand on my shoulder didn't go away. It burned. I pulled into the Starlight Motel off the interstate. It was a rundown place with flickering neon lights and a smell of stale cigarettes in the lobby. It was the last place anyone would look for the daughter of the wealthy Morgan family. That was exactly why I chose it. I paid cash for 3 nights. The clerk, a guy with heavy eyelids who looked like he hadn't slept in a week, didn't even ask for ID. He just slid a plastic keycard across the counter. "Room 104, he mumbled. "Don't smoke in the room." I nodded and walked out into the cold night air. My hands were shaking so hard, I dropped the keycard twice before I could get the door open. Inside, the room was small and sad. There was a bed with a floral bedspread that looked like it hadn't been washed since the 90s, a small desk, and a heavy curtain that smelled like dust. I locked the door. I put the chain on. Then I dragged the desk chair under the doorknob. I was safe. For now. I sat on the edge of the bed. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the 2 things that were going to change my life. In my left hand, the silver USB drive from my grandmother. In my right hand, Frank's smartphone. I took a deep breath. I needed to be calm. I needed to be the person my father raised, not the victim Frank wanted me to be. I opened my laptop. It hummed to life, the screen casting a blue glow over the dark room. I plugged in the USB drive first. A password prompt appeared. My grandmother had said my father left it. I tried his birthday. Incorrect. I tried my birthday. Incorrect. I tried the date he founded the company. Incorrect. I closed my eyes. I thought about him. I thought about the days before he died. We used to go fishing on the weekends. He had an old boat he loved more than his luxury cars. He called it his freedom machine. I typed in Ladybird. The folder unlocked. My breath hitched. Inside, there were dozens of folders. Tax returns 2017. Offshore suspicions. Frank background check. But at the very bottom, there was a video file simply labeled. For Aurora, I clicked play. The video player opened. The image was grainy at first, then it focused. It was my father. He was sitting in his study, the same room Frank had turned into a man cave with a pool table and a bar. My dad was wearing his favorite flannel shirt. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes. "Aurora," he said. His voice filled the small motel room. It was deep and warm, a sound I hadn't heard in years. Tears immediately welled up in my eyes. I pressed a hand over my mouth to keep from sobbing aloud. "If you are watching this," he continued, looking directly into the camera lens, "then I am gone. And more importantly, it means your grandmother gave you this drive. I told her only to give it to you if she felt you were in danger, or if Frank showed his true colors." He sighed, rubbing his face with a hand that looked so strong, so familiar. "I love your mother, Aurora, but she is fragile. She needs to be loved so badly that she refuses to see the truth about people. I met Frank Miller a year ago. He charmed her. He charmed me at first, but I've been digging. Numbers at the company aren't adding up. Inventory is going missing, and I found out Frank has a different name in Nevada. He has a history, Aurora." My stomach turned over. A criminal history. "I tried to confront him," my dad said. "He denied it. He spun a web of lies. I don't have enough proof to go to the police yet, and I don't want to break your mother's heart if I'm wrong. But I don't think I'm wrong. My heart has been acting up lately. Maybe it's stress. Maybe it's something else, but I need to protect you." He leaned closer to the camera. His blue eyes were intense. "I wrote a new will, Aurora. The one Frank knows about is a decoy. The real will leaves the company, the house, and all my personal assets to you, placed in a trust until you are 25, or until you present this evidence. The original copy of this will is in a safety deposit box at First National Bank. The key is taped under the bottom drawer of my workbench in the garage, the one with the vice grip. Frank never goes in the garage. He paused. He looked sad. I'm sorry I couldn't stay to fight him myself, honey. I'm sorry I'm leaving you with a mess. But you are strong. You are a Morgan. You have my blood. Don't let him take what is yours. Don't let him bully you. Use this drive. Burn him down. The video ended. The screen went black. I sat there for a long time. I felt a strange mixture of grief and power. My father hadn't abandoned me. He had been preparing me. He had given me a weapon from the grave. I wiped my face. I wasn't crying anymore. I was ready to work. I turned to Frank's phone. He was arrogant. He thought he was untouchable. He didn't even have a complex passcode. It was 123,456. I unlocked it. I went straight to his emails. I knew he had a secret account because I had seen notifications pop up on his iPad at home before he quickly swiped them away. I found the app. Secure Mail. I opened it. It was a treasure trove of filth. There were emails to a woman named Candy in Las Vegas. Frank, just wired you the 5,000. Keep your mouth shut about the old days. There were emails to a contractor about the warehouse repairs. Frank, double the invoice amount. I'll pay it from the company. You kick back 40% to my personal account. Cash only. And then, the smoking gun regarding my life. An email chain with the subject line, Aurora Trust Liquidation. It was dated 2 weeks after my 18th birthday. From Frank Miller to Cayman Holdings Limited. Subject, transfer body. The girl turned 18. I need to move the funds before she figures out how to access the portal. Forge the market loss statement we talked about. Make it look like the recession wiped out the bonds. Move the $450,000 to my account ending in 998. He had stolen it. He hadn't just mismanaged it. He hadn't just made bad investments. He had deliberately, coldly stolen my college money to fund his own secret account. I scrolled further. There were texts about Brittany. Brittany. Dad, I crashed the car again. The bumper is hanging off. Frank, don't worry, princess. Bring it to the shop. I'll tell them a delivery truck hit it in the company lot. Insurance will cover it. Insurance fraud. I sat there for hours, screenshotting everything. I emailed the screenshots to a secret email account I had created years ago. I backed them up to the cloud. I backed them up to the USB drive. I was building a fortress of evidence. By the time the sun started to peek through the heavy curtains, I knew everything. I knew about his debts. I knew about his mistresses. I knew about the bribes. I wasn't the stepdaughter anymore. I was the witness, the judge, and the jury. The next morning, I didn't leave the room. I ordered a pizza and told the delivery guy to leave it outside the door. I ate cold pepperoni while I organized my attack. I had worked in the filing room of Morgan Logistics, now F&M Global, for 4 years. Frank thought he was demeaning me by making me do the grunt work. He thought making me file tax documents and compliance reports was a punishment. He was wrong. It was training. I knew exactly who to contact. I knew the names of the auditors. I knew the email addresses of the state regulators. I knew the specific agents at the IRS who handled corporate fraud because I had filed their letters. I opened a blank document. I started drafting. This wasn't going to be a tantrum. This was going to be a surgical strike. Target 1. The IRS subject. Whistleblower complaint, F&M Global/Frank Miller. I attached the screenshots of the kickbacks from the contractors. I attached the bank statements showing company money moving into his personal offshore accounts. The IRS doesn't care about family drama. They care about unpaid taxes. Frank hadn't declared any of this illegal income. Message. Attached is evidence of systematic tax evasion, embezzlement, and money laundering by CEO Frank Miller. Note the disparity between reported income and the assets in the Cayman account. Target 2. The State Attorney General subject. Estate fraud and elder abuse. The estate of Robert Morgan. I attached my father's video. I attached the digital trail of the stolen trust fund. I attached the emails where Frank discussed forging the bank documents to show a market loss. Message. My stepfather, Frank Miller, fraudulently accessed and liquidated a trust fund established for my education. He also produced a fraudulent will. Attached is video testimony from the deceased and bank records proving the theft. Target 3. The board of directors. These were the men Frank drank whiskey with. They were his buddies. But in business, there are no buddies. There are only liabilities. Subject. Urgent. CEO misconduct and embezzlement of company assets. I sent them the proof that Frank was using company funds to pay for Brittany's failed businesses, her cars, and his own gambling debts. Message: Gentlemen, while you have been cutting employee benefits to save money, Frank Miller has been draining the operating capital for personal use. See attached invoices for consulting that were actually payments for his daughter's Paris vacation. Target 4. Brittany's creditors. I found debt collection emails in Frank's trash folder. Brittany owed money to credit card companies, a modeling agency she broke a contract with, and a luxury car dealership. Frank was co-signed on all of them. I forwarded the evidence of Frank's impending financial collapse to the collections departments. Message: The assets of your debtor, Frank Miller, are likely to be frozen due to federal investigation within 48 hours. I suggest you file your claims immediately. Target 5. My mother. This was the one that made my hands shake. I stared at the screen. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to ask her why she didn't stand up when he pushed me, why she let him erase me, but I knew anger wouldn't save her. Only the truth would. Subject: the truth about Frank. I didn't write a long letter, I just attached the video of my dad. Message: Mom, I know you think I'm the problem. I know you think I'm jealous. But please, for the love of Dad, watch this video. He knew. He tried to warn us. Frank isn't who you think he is. I'm safe, but I'm not coming back until he is gone. I sat back. It was 3:00 p.m. The emails were drafted. The attachments were loaded. I felt a wave of nausea. Once I pressed send, there was no going back. I would destroy the company my father built. I would destroy my mother's marriage. I would humiliate my family publicly. But then I remembered the cranberry sauce. I remembered the silence at the table. I remembered Frank's laugh when he told me my college fund was gone. He had already destroyed the family. I was just clearing away the wreckage. I clicked send, then send, then send. I watched the progress bars complete. Message sent. I closed the laptop. I laid down on the bed. I stared at the water stain on the ceiling. It was done. The fuse was lit. Now I just had to wait for the explosion. The silence lasted for 24 hours. That was the time it took for the emails to be read, processed, and for the panic to set in. Then the world exploded. My phone, which I had kept on silent, started vibrating across the nightstand. It buzzed so hard it nearly fell off. Incoming call, Mom incoming call, Mom incoming call, Mom incoming call, Frank incoming call, unknown number. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to talk. Then came the texts. Mom. Aurora, what have you done? The bank called. Frank's cards are declined. Call me, Mom. Frank is shouting. He says you hacked him. He's calling the police on you. Frank, you little ungrateful witch. You think you're smart. You just ruined your mother's life. I'm going to bury you. I blocked Frank's number. I felt a cold satisfaction. He was scared. For the first time in 10 years, the bully was scared. But Frank wasn't going to go down without a fight. He had money, for now, and he had a reputation as a fighter. 2 days later, I saw the counterattack. I was scrolling through social media on my burner phone. Brittany had posted a video. It was trending in our local area. She was sitting on her bed, wearing a hoodie, looking small and fragile. She had clearly spent time messing up her hair to look distressed. Hey guys, she whispered into the camera, wiping away a fake tear. I didn't want to do this, but I have to speak up. My stepsister, Aurora, she's having a breakdown. She attacked my dad at Christmas. She pushed him. And now she's hacking our accounts and spreading lies. She's demanding money, blackmailing us. We're terrified. If you see her, please tell her to get help. I read the comments. OMG, stay safe, Brit. I always knew she was crazy. Jealousy is a disease. My face burned. They were spinning the narrative. They were making me the villain. Then I got an email. It was from a law firm, Stone and Associates. Dear Miss Morgan, we represent Frank Miller. You are hereby ordered to cease and desist all defamation and illegal distribution of private correspondence. We are filing a civil suit against you for $5 million in damages for emotional distress and corporate espionage. If you do not issue a public retraction within 24 hours, we will seek your immediate arrest. I felt a spike of fear. A lawsuit, arrest. I was 22 years old. I had $300 in my pocket. I couldn't fight a high-powered law firm. I started to panic. Maybe I had messed up. Maybe the truth wasn't enough against money and lawyers. I paced the motel room. I needed allies. I was all alone. Then my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't save, but I recognized the area code. Text. Aurora, it's Sarah from the office. The paralegal. I stared at it. Sarah. She was a quiet woman, always wearing oversized cardigans. Frank treated her like a servant. He yelled at her if his coffee was cold. He made her walk his dog. Text, I saw the board meeting memo. They are freaking out. Frank is shredding documents. He told me to take a box of 2018 tax files to the incinerator. My heart stopped. 2018 was the year my dad died. Those files were the missing link. Me, did you burn them? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Sarah, no, I'm looking at them. There are handwritten notes from Frank. Aurora, he paid off the coroner. There's a note here about expedited death certificate, no autopsy. The room spun. No autopsy. My dad had a heart attack, or so we were told. But if Frank paid to skip the autopsy, me, Sarah, please don't destroy them. I'm at the Starlight Motel, room 104. It was a risk giving her my location, but I had to trust someone. An hour later, a beat-up Honda Civic pulled into the parking lot. Sarah got out. She was clutching a cardboard box to her chest like a shield. She looked terrified, looking over her shoulder. I opened the door. She rushed in. He's insane, she gasped, dumping the box on the bed. He's screaming at everyone. He fired the CFO this morning. He threw a stapler at me. She looked at me, her eyes wide. He didn't just steal the money, Aurora, she whispered. I think he let your dad die, or worse. We opened the box. There were bank receipts, withdrawal slips, and a note in Frank's handwriting, Dr. Evans, $10,000 cash. Heart failure diagnosis confirmed. He had paid the doctor. I wasn't just fighting a thief anymore. I was fighting a monster. We need the FBI, I said. Not just the IRS, the FBI. I know an agent, Sarah said. My cousin's husband works at the field office. I called him on the way here. Is he coming? No, Sarah said. We're going to him. The next morning, the sky was gray and heavy with snow. It fit the mood. We sat in a sterile interrogation room at the FBI headquarters. It smelled of coffee and floor wax. Agent Miller, a stern woman with a sharp bob cut, was going through the papers Sarah and I had brought. She had been skeptical at first. A family dispute, a disgruntled daughter. But as she read the emails, and then the doctor's payoff note, her face hardened. This note, she said, tapping the paper. Dr. Evans lost his license last year for opioid distribution. If he falsified a death certificate. She looked up at me. You have the original will location? Yes, I said. My dad said it's in the garage, under the workbench. Agent Miller stood up. We have enough for a probable cause warrant. Fraud, embezzlement, and potential homicide investigation. We're moving now. He's a flight risk if he knows the walls are closing in. I want to be there, I said. It's not safe, Aurora. It's my house, I said. It's my father's house. I need to see him leave it. She hesitated, then nodded. You stay in the vehicle, you do not engage. We drove in a convoy, unmarked, no sirens, silence. We arrived at the estate at 7:00 a.m. The house looked beautiful in the snow. The Christmas lights were still up, looking tacky now in the gray morning light. I sat in the back of Agent Miller's car. I watched. The agents moved with terrifying speed. They swarmed the porch. One of them used a battering ram on the heavy oak front door. Boom! The sound echoed in my chest. A few minutes later, the shouting started. I could hear Frank's voice even from the street. Do you know who I am? Get your hands off me. I'll sue you, I'll sue the whole government. Then, he appeared. He was dragged out in his silk pajamas. He wasn't the slick, charming man anymore. He was red-faced, balding without his hairpiece, looking pathetic. His hands were cuffed behind his back. He looked wildly around the yard. He saw the black car I was sitting in. He couldn't see me through the tinted glass, but he knew. He stared right at the car, his eyes bulging with hate. An agent shoved him into a van. Then came Brittany. She was crying hysterically, holding her phone up as if she was live-streaming her own arrest. My dad didn't do anything. This is harassment. She was escorted to a separate car. She looked like a child whose toy had been taken away. And finally, my mother. She wasn't handcuffed. An agent was walking next to her, talking calmly. She was wrapped in a thick wool blanket. She looked lost. She looked at the police cars, at the open door of her home, at the neighbors gathering on their lawns. She looked broken. I felt a pang of pity, but I pushed it down. She had let this happen. She had looked the other way for years while he spent my inheritance and erased my father's memory. She had chosen comfort over truth. Now she had neither. The agents spent the rest of the day raiding the house. They found the cash hidden in the walls. They found the fake passports Frank had made. And in the garage, under the workbench, exactly where my dad said it would be, They found the key to the safety deposit box. I went to the bank that afternoon with Agent Miller. We opened the box. There it was, a thick envelope, last will and testament of Robert Morgan. I read the first page. I leave 100% of Morgan Logistics and all real estate properties to my daughter, Aurora Morgan. Frank Miller is to receive nothing. I held the paper against my chest and closed my eyes. Thank you, Dad, I whispered. I drove to the company headquarters. The news had broken. CEO arrested. The stock was plummeting. The employees were in a panic. I walked into the lobby. The security guard, Mike, looked up. He looked ashamed. Miss Morgan, he stammered. I'm so sorry about everything. It's okay, Mike, I said. Unlock the executive elevator. But, your badge. I don't need a badge, I said. I own the building. He unlocked it. I rode up to the top floor. I walked into Frank's office. It smelled like his cologne. I opened the window to let the fresh air in. I sat in the big leather chair. I picked up the phone. This is Aurora Morgan, I said to the operator. Call an emergency board meeting. We have work to do. The trial was the event of the year. Frank tried everything. He fired his lawyers. He faked a heart attack in court. He tried to claim insanity. But the evidence was a mountain that he couldn't climb. Sarah testified about the shredded documents. The contractor testified about the kickbacks. Dr. Evans, in exchange for a lighter sentence on his drug charges, testified that Frank had paid him to fake the death certificate details. My father had died of natural causes, but Frank wanted to ensure no autopsy would reveal the stress-induced medication levels in his system. It wasn't murder, but it was obstruction of justice and desecration. I took the stand on the final day. Frank glared at me from the defense table. He looked small. The prosecutor asked me, "Why did you wait so long to come forward?" I looked at the jury. I looked at my mother, sitting in the back row, wiping her eyes. Because I was afraid, I said honestly. I was told I was worthless. I was told I was ungrateful. I believed them. But then, he pushed me. And I realized that if I didn't push back, I would disappear completely. The jury came back in 4 hours. Guilty, all counts. Frank was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. He screamed as they dragged him away. I didn't feel happy, I just felt relief. The monster was in a cage. Brittany got probation and 500 hours of community service. The judge was harsh with her. You are an adult, he told her. Ignorance is not a defense when you are spending stolen money. She had to get a job. I heard she was working at a cosmetics counter at the mall. She lived in a small apartment with 2 roommates. She blocked me on social media. I didn't mind. My mother was the hardest part of the rebuilding. She didn't go to jail, but she lost everything else. The house was mine. The money was mine. She had signed a prenup with Frank that left her with nothing if they divorced, and since the marriage was based on fraud, it was annulled. I could have left her on the street. Part of me wanted to, but I remembered my dad's video. I love your mother, but she is fragile. I bought a small condo in town. I put it in my name, but I let her live there. I paid for her therapy. We met for coffee once a week. I miss him sometimes, she confessed one rainy Tuesday. Not the monster, but the man I thought he was. I feel so stupid, Aurora. You were manipulated, Mom, I said. He was a professional liar. But you have to learn to be alone. You have to learn to be Linda, not just someone's wife. I'm trying, she said. She reached across the table and took my hand. I am so proud of you. You are so much like your father. That was the only apology I needed. I threw myself into the company. I renamed it Morgan Logistics. I fired the yes men. I brought back the old crew. I worked 18-hour days. I wore hard hats and walked the warehouse floors. I learned every driver's name. The company bounced back. It thrived. 1 year later, Christmas arrived again. I debated skipping it. But then I realized, if I skipped it, the memory of that last Christmas would win. I had to overwrite it. I invited the family. The aunts, the uncles, the cousins, the ones who had sat silent while I was shoved. They all came. They were nervous. They brought extra gifts. They complimented the house. We sat down for dinner. The table was set with the good china. The smell of roast beef filled the air. I walked to the dining room. My chair was empty. My mother stood by the sideboard. She looked at me. She smiled, a real tentative smile. Sit down, honey, she said. I pulled out the chair. I sat down. I looked around the table. 23 faces looked back at me. There was no fear. There was no tension. There was respect. Merry Christmas, I said. I raised my glass. To Robert, I said, and to the truth, To the truth, they echoed. I took a sip of wine. It was warm and rich. I looked at the empty spot where Frank used to sit. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt peace. I had reclaimed my seat. I had reclaimed my name. And most importantly, I had learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about who stands up for you when you fall. And if no one stands up, you stand up yourself. And you burn the house down until the truth is the only thing left standing.